My name is Mara Ellington, 36 years old. The night it happened, the dining room felt colder than the winter air leaking through the old sash windows. I'd set the table myself. Simple, solid, the way I like a life to be. 2 candles, a bowl of roasted vegetables, a roast that Dylan insisted on basting because it makes it shiny, Mom. The irony. This was my house, the one I bought with paychecks no one helped me earn, and my parents were living in it like royalty who'd misplaced their crown. The roast hadn't cooled before my father leaned across the runner, finger stabbing the space between us. "You and your kid are just freeloaders," he said, voice swollen with the kind of certainty that can't tell the difference between history and habit. My mother didn't flinch. She never does. She smoothed the napkin in her lap, looked me dead in the eye, and smiled the way she smiles when she's already rehearsed the scene. "He's right," she said softly, as if gentleness could soften a blade. Dylan's fork hovered midair. I could feel his eyes on me, wide and waiting. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I set my glass down without a ring on the wood and said the one sentence that stopped everyone in the room, even the clock that always runs a minute fast. "This is the last dinner you'll eat in my house as if it's yours." Silence. My father's mouth opened, then closed. My mother's smile faltered. Dylan exhaled, a tiny sound like a bird escaping a snare. I didn't say more. Not then. A single sentence can be a doorway. You choose which way to walk through it. To explain why I built that doorway at all, you have to see the house I grew up in, the one with creaky floors and a backyard that smelled like cut grass, and a summer we pretended would never end. Louisville raised me in a modest 2-story where the air itself seemed to remember our names. I was 18 when the ground tilted. My grandfather had died a year earlier, and with the stubborn love only he possessed, he left me $100,000. Not to flaunt, not to waste. He said it right there in the letter, tucked into the will, his looping hand steady. "For your start, Mara. Build what they say you can't." I held that letter like a passport. I had a plan. Computer science at the University of Louisville. 4 years I'd already mapped in sticky notes on my wall. Algorithms, systems, an internship, an eventual product with my name tucked somewhere in the commit history. I wanted a life made of screens and logic and the small miracle when something you built works. One humid evening that smelled like rain and reheated casserole, my parents called me into the living room. My father sat in his recliner, arms crossed. My mother stood by the window, the blinds slanting her face into stripes. They didn't waste time. "We need your inheritance," my father said, like he was reporting the weather. "For what?" I asked, though my stomach already knew. My mother turned toward me, eyes bright with a faith I recognized from church but had never seen applied to me. "Your brother has a chance to make it big," she said, and the way she said your brother told me everything. "He's starting a construction company with your father. It's a sure thing, Mara. We'll pay you back." Philip didn't even show. Golden children don't need to make their own announcements. They have heralds. He's 2 years older. Charisma like a warm handshake. The gravity well for every plan my parents ever had. I stood there holding my acceptance letter, the crest of the university impressing itself into my palm. "What about my college?" I asked, voice steady, because steady was all I had. My father shrugged. "You can get loans. This is for the family." My mother nodded, firming up the script. "Philip's business will set us all up. You'll see." You don't notice the exact second the air thins. You notice when breathing becomes a task. I felt the room press in. Their words weren't a request. They were a rerouting. $100,000, the runway my grandfather paved with love, and a lifetime of tired bones, redirected to a dream I wasn't allowed to have. They took it. There are softer verbs: borrowed, redirected, leveraged, but none of them changed the way my account balance looked the next week. Halved, then empty, and then my name in plain font with no cushion beneath it. They said they'd pay me back when the contracts landed. Spoiler, the company collapsed within a year under the weight of bad bids and worse bookkeeping. They never mentioned the money again. That night, I packed a duffel with 3 pairs of jeans, a sweater that smelled like the laundry soap my mom used, and the $500 I'd saved babysitting. I put the acceptance letter on top like a flag. No one tried to stop me. My father clicked to the sports channel. My mother watched the window. When I closed the front door, the house didn't groan or sigh. it stayed quiet, as if it had known this would happen for years. I moved into a cramped apartment near campus with two strangers who became allies in the shared language of broken toasters and late rent. Tuition was a beast. I worked mornings stocking shelves at the grocery store, nights waitressing at a diner where the coffee was always 2 minutes past burnt, and weekends tutoring high school kids in math. My mattress sat directly on the floor. I pinned my acceptance letter to the wall with blue tape and pretended it was art. There were weeks I ate instant noodles and convinced myself I liked them. There were nights I fell asleep over a textbook and woke up with pages impressed into my cheek like a map. I kept a spreadsheet for every bill and a second spreadsheet for every lie I told myself to keep going. It's temporary. It's worth it. It's yours. My parents called sometimes, twice a year, maybe 3 if a holiday got ambitious. "How's school?" my mother would ask, already winding up for the pivot. "Your brother's working so hard on his next project." She'd say Philip like a prayer. They never asked how I paid rent or whether my car ate its own timing belt. I stopped expecting them to. By the time I graduated, top of my class because spite, it turns out, is a renewable resource, I had a job offer at a tech startup in Louisville and a stack of loans I stared at without blinking. I was 22 and so tired I felt hollow, but the first time I deployed code that solved a problem for thousands of people who didn't know my name, I understood what my grandfather meant by build what they say you can't. Life took on shape. A decent apartment, a couch that wasn't a rescued curbside orphan, grocery lists that included fruit, not just caffeine. I met a colleague who made me laugh in the kind way, not the cruel way, married him, had a son, then discovered the messages that made a marriage end. I didn't perform heartbreak for an audience. I packed a suitcase and told him to go. He stayed in Dylan's life as a check on the first of every month and a voice on birthdays. That was enough. Dylan grew into a 12-year-old with an astronaut's curiosity and a laugh that warmed rooms like they were wired for it. We built a ritual around Friday pizza and movies, around homework at the kitchen table with pencils that made the same scratchy sound my life made at 18 when I wrote budgets I couldn't afford. I made him a promise early and often. You are enough, and you will not pay their debts. Meanwhile, my parents' messages changed shape. My mother started inserting, "How's work?" as a preface to, "Your father's business isn't doing well," or "Philip's got something big brewing. Could you help?" The first time, I sent a couple thousand because the past is sticky and I hadn't learned how to peel it off. Then it was 5, then 10, then I started saying no. Boundaries don't arrive like cavalry. They arrive like a whisper you practice until it sounds like you. Which brings us back to my dining room, to my father's accusation and my mother's smile, to Dylan's fork hovering like a question mark, to the sentence I laid on the table like a contract. This is the last dinner you'll eat in my house, as if it's yours. It wasn't rage, it was arithmetic. For years, I had let other people do math with my life and write the answer in their handwriting. That night, I picked up the chalk. After I tucked Dylan into bed, I stood in the hallway and listened to the house breathe. The walls still knew my name. So did I. Tomorrow, I would start the paperwork. Tomorrow, I would make calls. Banks, lawyers, Denise with her careful eyes and sharper mouth. But in that minute, in the hush after a sentence changes the air, I went back to the girl in the humid living room being told the future is communal, as long as the community is defined by one son. I whispered to her what I wish someone had whispered to me at 18. You can be kind and still say no. You can be loving and still leave. And then I turned off the dining room light, and the room didn't feel cold anymore. It felt honest. The clock on the wall started ticking again. I let it. The morning after that dinner, I woke to the sound of Dylan clattering bowls in the kitchen, and the image of my father's finger in the air, like he was tapping a calculator that only added up in his favor. I poured coffee, kissed the crown of Dylan's head, and packed his lunch while he told me a dream about a rocket that kept circling Earth because it couldn't decide where to land. Sometimes you have to pick a spot, I said, thinking of my own orbit around people who called dependency love. He nodded, solemn like only 12-year-olds can be, and asked if we could make a volcano for his science class. Absolutely, I said, and I meant it. Small eruptions I can plan for. It's the fault lines under the house that worry me. Fault lines aren't new to me. At 18, I learned to step lightly over them and still get where I was going. The first semester after I left home, my life was a schedule written in margins. Grocery shift at 5 a.m., shower in the campus gym, lecture, walk to the diner, memorize the pie rotation, and pretend to care about whose decaf was lukewarm. I'd sit on milk crates in the back room during 10-minute breaks and read about data structures while my feet throbbed from carrying plates that felt heavier than they looked. The apartment near campus was barely bigger than a storage unit. The radiator hissed like it was annoyed with me for daring to be warm. I learned to love cheap light bulbs and library heat. It wasn't grit that kept me moving. It was engineering. Problems with constraints. If I stacked enough hours, if I caught the bus instead of walking, if I returned soda cans for change, I could pay lab fees and still have eggs twice a week. I became the queen of the spreadsheet. I named them to feel less alone. Bridge, runway, breathing. When I wanted to cry, I added another column. The math didn't comfort me, but it told the truth. Numbers don't pretend to be family. My parents called on holidays at first. My mother's voice would soften at the start, then harden, as if she remembered she was supposed to be disappointed. "How's school?" she'd ask, and before I could answer, she'd pivot into an update on Philip, a contractor he'd met, a county official who said the right words, a bid that would change everything. "We're so proud of him," she'd say. I'd say, because approval is a language I've never been fluent in. My father kept calls short. He is efficient with attention. "Don't make enemies," he said once, as if I had a choice about who chose me, and then he hung up. By 22, I had a piece of paper that meant survival could be more than a stubborn act. I took the entry-level role at a Louisville startup where the servers hummed like a lullaby for the exhausted and the coffee was always hot. The first time I pushed a feature and watched error reports not flood in, I cried in the bathroom, quiet, pressed against a door that didn't know my name. My first paycheck felt like a declaration and a dare. I framed the stub like people frame diplomas. I bought a secondhand couch that didn't smell like someone else's nights. I learned the ways silence can be kind. Then love, or the thing I mistook for it because it held still when I looked at it. He was a colleague with a smile that felt like a safe on-ramp, steady jokes, arguments about syntax, the kind of attentiveness that wears well until it frays. We married, we bought plates, we invited friends to sit around them and promise us the future in toasts. Dylan arrived like sunlight does, a sudden awareness that the room had always been dull and now wasn't. For a while, I believed in the promise. Right up until the night I found messages that had nothing to do with work or weather, and everything to do with a loneliness I hadn't named because I was busy trying to be the kind of woman who doesn't need anything. I packed his suitcase and left it by the door. "Get out," I said without fury, because there are sentences that don't need volume to carry weight. He listened. He still sends money on time. He calls on birthdays. Dylan loves him in the way children love constellations, from a distance, with wonder. I make space for that and keep the door frame strong. I became the kind of mother who never says later to a volcano project. Friday nights turned into rituals. Pizza, old sci-fi, Dylan's head on my shoulder when the hero decides not to go back to the planet that hurt him. Denise entered my life at a networking event where the air smelled like ambition and the canapes tasted like nothing. She laughed at a joke I made about product roadmaps and then proceeded to fix my financial life with the efficient tenderness of a surgeon who cares if you wake up. "You're doing triple the labor," she said, "and half the protection." We met on Tuesdays to unspool my accounts, to name the ghosts that haunt a woman who has taught herself not to want safety. Denise is the opposite of my mother's voice. Blunt, gentle, allergic to manipulation. "You owe them nothing," she told me the first time I admitted the small transfers I'd been sending my parents, 2,000 here, 5 there, guilt disguised as generosity. "Generosity without consent is theft of self," she said. I wrote it on a sticky note and stuck it beside my screen. Still, guilt is a talented shapeshifter. My mother's texts grew with my title. "How's work, Mara? You must be doing so well. Your father's business is tight this month. Philip has a new opportunity. Are you able to help?" I wired money twice before I learned the power of "I can't." The third time I typed, "No," then stared at the tiny word until it looked like a person I could love. My father called once, voice gravel and grievance. We sacrifice so much, he said, letting the line fill with the implication that raising your child is a charitable act. I was sitting in a laundromat between loads, Dylan drawing rocket fins on a napkin. I'm at the laundromat, I said. I'm doing the best I can. He said, don't be dramatic, like he was signing a form, and hung up. Work became the structure I built peace on. I learned to manage people without making them feel managed. My team shipped on time. I defended a junior developer in a meeting where a louder man tried to take credit for her work. She did it, I said, and the room blinked and then nodded. Respect is a more durable currency than fear. Sometimes I'd catch myself on the way home, smiling for no reason. It frightened me, then it steadied me. There is a version of adulthood where you are not bracing all the time. Of course the past knocked. It prefers evenings. One Tuesday, as Dylan argued with a math worksheet, and I listened for the moment to swoop in as his favorite tutor, my phone lit with my mother's name. I let it ring. Guilt stirred, or curiosity, or the part of me that wanted proof of tenderness. I answered. Her voice shook, not with performance, but with something close to human. It's your father, she said. He's sick. We need you to come home. The word home is a landmine. I stepped around it. What's wrong? I asked. She said heart and surgery and bank and foreclosure and 300,000. And I heard the old wind-up. You are the solution to our math because you learned to solve things. What do you want me to do? I asked. And she said the line she always says when she wants to sound generous while taking, You're doing so well, and we're family. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet and watched Dylan erase a wrong answer, jaw set. He looked up. Everything okay? He asked. And that he asks is the proof that I have not repeated their mistakes. I'm here, I said. We're okay. Later, after he slept, I opened the voice memo app where a single file sits, old and stubborn. Unknown. I'd never listened all the way through. My thumb hovered. I pressed play. My mother's breath at the start, the sound of a newsroom in the background, and then, Mara, are you safe? A producer shouted something. A chair scraped. The line went dead. I replayed the pause between my name and safe. I don't know why. Maybe because even a cracked apology contains a temperature. Maybe because forgiveness is a machine you keep unplugged until the wiring doesn't burn the house down. I called Denise the next morning. They're going to make their emergency your responsibility, she said. Decide your boundaries while you still have a calm heartbeat. I wrote a list. I added subclauses. I drank water. I told Dylan I might travel for a few days and arranged for our neighbor to keep him fed and laughing. He said, Will Grandpa be okay? And I said, I don't know yet, because I don't lie to him, even when the truth bends. On the plane to Louisville, the city looked smaller than it did in my memory, the river a dark ribbon sewing together places I had outgrown. At the rental car counter, the clerk asked if I wanted insurance, and I said, Absolutely, because if adulthood has taught me anything, it's that you prepare for collisions even when you plan to drive carefully. I parked in front of the house I once left without a goodbye. The paint peeled at the edges like the past does when you don't tend it. Inside, my mother had set the table as if ceremony could make demands reasonable. My father sat thinner than before, pride still filling the space illness could not. We made coffee. We spoke in the language of invoices and sentiment. When I asked for a plan, they said, you. When I asked for numbers, they said family. When I didn't nod, I saw the first hairline crack in my mother's certainty. That night, I booked a hotel instead of staying in my old room. I chose a place with a good deadbolt and a lobby that didn't judge my late returns. I stood at the window and decided on the spot I'd land. Not a circle, a line. In the morning, I would go to the bank. I would call a lawyer. I would tell the truth in sentences that did not tremble. Fault lines are only dangerous if you pretend they aren't there. I wasn't pretending anymore. The house smelled the same, even after all the years. Faint mildew beneath a layer of lemon polish, like my mother had tried to scrub the years away but hadn't gotten down into the bones. I stood in the living room, where the carpet was worn into valleys, and the old recliner sagged under my father's weight. He looked smaller than I remembered, shrunken but not softened, his pride pressed into the lines around his mouth. He gestured at the couch. Sit, he said, as if I were a guest in my own childhood. I sat because defiance too early is wasted. My mother brought coffee in chipped mugs, her hands steady. She smiled at me, the kind of smile that carries a plea wrapped inside a command. Thank you for coming back, Mara. It means everything. I took a sip, bitter. What's the plan? I asked. Her smile faltered, then hardened into something rehearsed. The plan is you, she said. Father leaned forward, his hands clasped. The bank's ready to foreclose. We owe $300,000. They don't care about our history. But you can fix this. You're doing well. You make what, $350,000 a year? I blinked at the precision. And how would you know that? Mother's voice sharpened. We read things. You're not exactly invisible. Invisible. That's what I'd been all my life at their table, and now suddenly my salary was a spotlight they felt entitled to. Why is this on me? I asked quietly. Father's jaw tightened. Because family takes care of family. Unless that family is me, I said. Silence followed, stretched taut. I left soon after, claiming fatigue. But I didn't go to the hotel just to sleep. I needed distance, needed to breathe. The next day my mother called again, her tone sugary. Come for dinner, just one night. We'll talk things through. I should have said no. Every instinct screamed trap, but something in me wanted to face it, to burn down whatever fiction they thought we were still living in. That evening, I drove back. The dining table was set like a stage. Candles, crystal glasses, plates aligned, military perfect. My father at the head, my mother fussing over silverware. And then the door opened. Philip walked in, late as always, his cologne arriving before he did. He smiled like a man stepping into applause, kissed our mother's cheek, clapped our father on the shoulder, and dropped into the seat across from me. Mara, he said, his tone soaked in mockery, you look prosperous. I gripped my fork until it left a dent in my palm. The first half of dinner was chatter. Neighbors, weather, Philip's new venture. Real estate this time. No details. Just promises, like always. My mother kept ladling food onto his plate, fussing like he was still 12. My father carved his meat with surgical precision, saying little, waiting. Then it came. Mara, my father said, setting down his knife. His voice was low, deliberate, the way he used to sound before delivering a lecture I couldn't win. We need $200,000. That will keep the house. Give us time. $200,000. Said as if it were pocket change, as if years of my labor, my sacrifices, Dylan's future were theirs to claim. I set my fork down. I can't, I said simply. Mother's voice sharpened. Can't or won't? Both, I said. You've always been selfish, my father snapped, his cheeks coloring. We raised you, gave you everything, and now you hoard while we drown. I laughed then. Couldn't help it. A sharp, brittle sound. Everything? You mean my inheritance? The one you handed Philip without blinking? The future you stole before I even had the chance to try? Philip leaned back in his chair, smirking. Don't play the martyr, Mara. You're doing fine. Look at you. Big job, nice house. Don't tell me you can't spare some change. Change, I hissed. That money is Dylan's college, his security, his life. Why should he bleed for your mistakes? It was then my mother leaned forward, her smile icy. Because you and your son are freeloaders, living off what we gave you, acting like you're better than us. The word lodged in my chest. Freeloaders. Directed at me, I could have shrugged it off. But at Dylan, my Dylan, who saved his allowance for science kits, who never asked for more than a pizza on Friday nights. Something inside me snapped. I stood, my chair scraping against the floor, the sound slicing through the room. Don't you dare bring my son into this, I said, my voice steady, sharp as glass. You don't get to speak his name, not after everything. Father's face darkened. Show some respect. We are your parents. Parents? I repeated, almost laughing again. Parents don't take their child's future and hand it to someone else. Parents don't starve their daughter of love while feeding their son excuses. Parents don't call their grandchild a freeloader. Philip's smirk slipped, but he kept quiet. For once. Mother's smile turned cruel. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back when you realize you can't outdo us. I leaned across the table, close enough to see the lines in her face. No, I said. I regret ever believing you were capable of love without conditions. Silence dropped like a curtain. I walked out, my footsteps steady, my heart pounding so hard it rattled my ribs. The night air hit me like water, cool and clarifying. By the time I reached my car, I already knew what I had to do. This wasn't about saving them. This wasn't about the house. This was about drawing the line so deep it could never be crossed again. And if they thought I'd stay quiet while they dragged my name, while they dared to drag Dylan's through the mud, they had no idea what kind of woman they had raised in their shadow. Tomorrow I'd make the first call. Lawyer, bank, Denise. The war they started at that table was about to move into a battlefield of my choosing. The war began 2 days later, not with lawyers or banks, but with a notification on my phone. At first, I thought it was just the group chat buzzing about weekend plans, but then I saw the preview text. Mara, have you seen this? I opened TikTok, and there she was, my mother. Her face filled the screen, pale and tear-streaked. She clutched a tissue like a prop, her voice trembling with the kind of practiced sorrow only she could summon on cue. My daughter abandoned us, she said, sniffing for effect. We gave her everything, and now, when her father is sick, when we are losing our home, she refuses to help. She has money, but not compassion, not even for her own blood. The caption read, "Ungrateful daughter leaves parents to lose everything." Within hours, it had thousands of views. Comments poured in, strangers calling me heartless, selfish, a disgrace. I scrolled and scrolled, my pulse racing, each word branding me in a way that felt more permanent than ink. Dylan's soccer coach texted. A coworker sent me a screenshot. Even Denise called, her voice sharp. They went public, she said. This isn't just family drama anymore, it's reputation warfare. I sat on my hotel bed, the curtains drawn, my hands shaking. They hadn't just attacked me, they'd weaponized strangers. And worst of all, they'd dragged Dylan into it by implication. For an hour, I stared at the post button, drafting a video response in my head. I wanted to shout the truth, that they'd stolen my inheritance, called my son a freeloader, demanded $200,000 as if it were a family tithe. I wanted to post the receipts, the texts, the calls, but I stopped myself. They wanted a public screaming match. I wouldn't give it to them. Instead, I called Denise. Hit them where it hurts, she said flatly. They want the house? Buy it out from under them. You have the means. Take their leverage. End this. It felt ruthless, but also just. The next morning, Denise introduced me to Laura Chen, a real estate attorney with a voice like polished steel. Laura laid it out clearly. The bank was preparing to foreclose on my parents' house. Their loan was in default, $300,000 unpaid. You can purchase the property directly from the bank, Laura explained. Wipe their claim clean. You'd be the legal owner. They'd have no standing. I exhaled, slow. And if I let them stay? You set the terms, she said. Lease, repayment schedule, interest. If they default, eviction. The thought settled over me like a cloak. It wasn't revenge, it was reclamation. Denise worked her magic, aligning savings, investments, even a manageable loan. A week later, I sat at a polished oak desk in a downtown office, pen in hand. My name on the deed. My childhood home now mine, in a way it had never been before. The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd stolen my inheritance once, and now I was buying back the very walls they'd used to keep me small. I didn't tell them right away. Instead, I had Laura draft a notice, official, cold, professional. The letter laid it all out. I was now the legal owner. They could remain as tenants if they signed a 5-year repayment contract with interest. Miss one payment, and they'd be evicted. Tucked into the same envelope was a cease and desist. Eleanor Parker was to remove the defamatory video within 48 hours. Further lies would result in legal action. The notice was delivered by courier. Hours later, my phone lit up with my mother's name. When I answered, her voice was shrill, cracking at the edges. "You think you can control us?" she spat. "You're no better than us. Throwing your money around, pretending you're some savior." I let her rant, then cut in. "You got the notice. Follow it or face the consequences." Her gasp was sharp, like I'd slapped her. "You wouldn't dare." I already did. I hung up before she could reply. An hour later, a text from Philip. Just 4 words. "You're ruthless. Like them." I stared at the message, my jaw tight. Maybe I was ruthless, but I'd rather be ruthless than a victim. By week's end, the video was gone. Deleted. My mother posted a vague follow-up about misunderstandings and private matters, but the damage was already done. Strangers had judged me. Friends had questioned me. I couldn't erase it, but I could outlast it. The next time I saw my parents was in court. They'd refused to sign the repayment contract. Instead, they claimed they didn't owe me anything, that the house was theirs by right, that I was just a bitter daughter trying to humiliate them. I sat across from them, calm, composed, every document in order. The judge looked at me, then at them. The deed is clear. Ms. Ellington is the legal owner. You may remain if you accept her terms. Otherwise, eviction will proceed. My mother's glare could have carved stone. My father's hands trembled, not from illness this time, but from rage. I didn't flinch. For the first time in my life, the power in that room tilted toward me, and I intended to keep it there. The 30 days the court gave them ticked by like a slow drumbeat. Every time my phone buzzed, I half expected another tirade, another carefully sharpened message meant to puncture my resolve. And they came. Texts from my mother dripping with venom. You're tearing this family apart. How can you do this to your own blood? Then from my father, short and icy. You'll regret this, Mara. I saved every one of them, forwarding them to Laura. Paper trails are better than bruises. They last longer in court. Philip, of course, stayed quiet in public, but a mutual friend told me he was still bragging around town, still spinning his next venture. He never once called me directly. He didn't need to. My parents spoke for him, as they always had. The eviction notice expired on a Friday. That Monday, Laura called. They're out, she said simply. Sheriff confirmed it this morning. I drove down that afternoon. Dylan at a friend's house. Denise on speed dial in case I needed to scream. The front door creaked like it remembered me. Inside, the place looked like it had been abandoned in a storm. Boxes half packed. Dishes left in the sink. A pile of Philip's paperwork stacked in the corner of what used to be my bedroom. Ventures turned into clutter. I walked the rooms like an archaeologist. The kitchen still smelled faintly of cinnamon, though the counter was sticky. My old room, the one with glow-in-the-dark stars I'd once taped to the ceiling, had become a graveyard for Philip's failures. I stood there for a long time, remembering the girl who dreamed herself out of those walls. Then I called a cleaning crew, ordered paint, told Laura to list it for rent. Within 2 weeks, a young couple with 2 kids signed a lease. Their bicycles leaned against the porch railing the day they moved in. I stood across the street watching, their laughter spilling out the windows like the house itself had been reborn. For them, it would be a beginning. For me, it was an ending. The rental income more than covered the loan I'd taken. Every extra dollar went straight into Dylan's college fund. I opened the account in his name, let him choose the password. He grinned as he typed, Astronaut 2024. Life didn't magically smooth out, but something inside me did. The tether snapped, and suddenly I was lighter. Denise came over with takeout one night. She sprawled on my couch, chopsticks in hand, and said, You know you're free now, right? Free, I repeated, the words strange in my mouth. She nodded. They can't touch you anymore. But freedom, I learned, isn't just the absence of chains. It's the silence afterward. It's learning who you are when you're no longer defined by what you're running from. I threw myself into work, not as a distraction, but as a declaration. My team thrived under my leadership. I pushed projects that mattered, mentored junior developers the way I wish someone had mentored me. For the first time, I wasn't clawing my way up. I was steady, respected. At home, Dylan became my anchor. He came back from school one day holding a drawing, a rocket, streaking past the moon, flames bright and wild. For you, Mom, he said proudly. I taped it to the fridge, tears pricking my eyes. Every fight, every sleepless night, every courtroom glare. It was all for him. To show him that he never had to beg for his worth. One Saturday, we planted flowers in the backyard. Dylan knelt beside me, his hands dirty, his grin wide. Are Grandma and Grandpa mad at us? He asked suddenly, his voice small. I set my trowel down. They're mad at themselves, I said carefully. But we're okay. You and me, we're more than okay. He nodded, satisfied, and went back to digging. His trust felt like sunlight. And for the first time in years, I believed I could stop bracing for the next blow. But freedom has aftershocks, and sometimes the quietest nights carry the faintest echoes of the past. For weeks, I told myself it was over. I'd won. The house was mine, rented to a family who filled it with the kind of laughter I never knew there. My parents had been forced into an apartment on the edge of town, my father working books for a small firm, my mother bagging groceries in a store where no one cared about her reputation. Philip had slunk into their spare room, nursing whatever doomed scheme he was hatching next. But endings are never clean. One evening after work, I found a thick envelope in my mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting before I even opened it. My mother's sharp, slanted script, the kind that always looked like she was correcting the page. Inside wasn't a demand. Not exactly. It was pages of confession. A draft of something she must have typed and retyped, then finally written by hand as if shame required ink. Mara, I don't expect you to forgive me. I confused status with love. I thought raising children meant pushing them toward importance. I saw Philip's charm as currency, your practicality as stubbornness. I was wrong. Every time you succeeded, I told myself it wasn't enough, because if I admitted it was, then I'd have to face the ways I failed. I don't know if you'll ever read this all the way through. I just needed to put it somewhere outside myself. I read it twice. The words didn't soften me, but they stirred something I hadn't expected. Sorrow. Not for the years lost, not even for myself, but for the woman who had wasted so much love trying to measure it. I put the letter back in the envelope and slid it into the drawer of my nightstand. Not forgiven, not forgotten, just acknowledged. Meanwhile, life kept moving. Dylan's rocket drawings grew more elaborate, now with solar panels, now with tiny stick figure astronauts labeled ME and Mom. Work flourished. I was promoted to lead a division, my name finally spoken in the kind of meetings where once I'd been invisible. Denise clapped me on the back when I told her, grinning. You earned every ounce of this, she said. But the shadows didn't vanish. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear Dylan breathing in his room and wonder if I was strong enough to keep breaking the cycle. I thought of the voicemail I'd once replayed, my mother's half-finished question. Are you safe? Safe. It still hung in the air like a rope I hadn't decided to cut or climb. One Sunday, Dylan asked if we could drive past the old neighborhood. Just to see, he said. I hesitated, but we went. The house looked alive, new paint, toys scattered on the lawn, bikes leaning against the porch. The young couple had hung wind chimes that caught the breeze, their music bright and foreign. Dylan pressed his face to the window. Looks happy, he said simply. Yeah, I whispered. It does. We didn't stop. We didn't need to. That night, Dylan curled beside me on the couch as we watched a movie about explorers who found a new planet. He fell asleep halfway through, his head heavy on my shoulder. I muted the TV and stared at the window, where the streetlight painted a square of gold across the floor. I thought of my parents in their apartment. My father weaker but alive. My mother maybe folding bags at the checkout line, maybe staring at an empty chair where Philip should be. They had built their kingdom on denial, and now it had crumbled into something smaller, meaner, more real. I didn't pity them, but I didn't hate them either, not anymore. I reached for the envelope in my nightstand, held it in my hands. Then I put it back, unopened this time. Forgiveness wasn't a door I had to walk through tonight. Maybe never. What mattered was here, my son, my peace, the life I had built brick by brick out of the rubble they left me. Family, I realized, isn't who claims you. It's who shows up when the rent is due, when the homework is hard, when the pizza burns, but the laughter doesn't stop. I turned off the lamp, the house settling around us. Dylan stirred, murmured in his sleep. We're enough. Yes, I whispered into the dark, more certain than I had ever been. We are. And for the first time in years, I let the quiet be just that, quiet.